Here we go. All right. Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to our workshop that we've entitled The Flow from Writing to Publishing. I have with me Anna Berger and Mark Brower, and each one of us, and I'm Catherine Cartwright. Each one of us happens to have a really different and unique experience when it comes to publishing. So we're going to go ahead and get ourselves started, and we really want to encourage you to ask questions if you have them. Do raise your hand. We'll definitely be paying attention. Put it in the chat. That would be perfect too, because then we see it as well as your hand being raised. So that's all good. And really what we want to do in this workshop for you is to show what a realistic expectation of the I want to be a writer and become an author journey. So definitely we are going to cover everything that we possibly can cover for you, because it is a really huge and broad topic. So to start this off, I'd like to have Anna go ahead and introduce herself and her experiences, and then Mark will go, and then I'll go. So
wow, where do we start? I am a little bit of an accidental author. And the reason why I say accidental is I've never actually meant to write a book. I was busy with my business doing business coaching and life coaching with very wealthy people. And it just happened that I was riding on a weekend, I was riding a horse at a full speed, at a full gallop, and ended up underneath the hoofs, ended up for 4 months in hospital. So this was like totally out. And, I tend to believe that things happen for a reason. And, when I got up, opened my eyes and I go, okay, I'm still alive. That's a good sign. What am I supposed to do with this? And I've always tried to look at, okay, how can you utilize whatever you have, whatever time you have, or whatever position that you're in, how can you do it with ability to have some kind of contribution to the world. And I used to love my work, but it required me to be there physically. So for 4 months I was literally stuck on crutches and couldn't go anywhere. And I had, obviously my mind was still going crazy. And I actually came across Livebook at that time because I was thinking, okay, well, I need to see what else is happening out there in the world. And because my specialty is in subconscious recoding and how to, get all the, what people refer to as limiting beliefs, it's like how to just totally smash them and how to recode your subconscious mind. So that's what I was helping a lot of businesses, like when they hit a ceiling, let's say they're making millions of dollars and they can't get any more. They usually used to call me in to fix the business, but I would actually work on their subconscious mind to be able to recode it so they can be able to do much more. And when I came across, when I was sitting in front of my computer and I was watching all the people getting really excited about goals and also going on different seminars, like webinars, I've realized that a lot of people get super excited about doing things, but knowing what I know from subconscious perspective, unless this is recoded, it's just wishful thinking, because subconscious mind is so powerful, it will be pulling you back. So cut the long story short, I've decided I thought, okay, well, what can I do? And I thought maybe I can just write an ebook, just write something, get my thoughts together. And anyway, with all this time that I had, I just decided to start writing. Now, I had no experience in writing whatsoever. I've never wanted to be an author. I've always been the behind the scenes person, never wanted to, my second thing was English is my second language. So I was like straight away faced with limiting beliefs. I can't write, I can't spell properly. What do I know about publishing? Who do I think I am? And all these things came at me. Now, the great thing is, because I specialize in being able to recode this, I recoded it, and then I go, okay, it doesn't matter. Let me just figure out a way. So initially it was just simply putting a whole heap of thoughts on paper, and then doing lots of research in, okay, well, how do I get this to public? How do I, initially, how do I do, ebook, and just going through the whole research. So the process took a little bit longer than I thought it would, but it was really exciting. And I would highly recommend this journey to anybody. It's fantastic. I'm not sure. I don't want to take up too much time because I could talk about this forever, but I'm sure the questions will come later on.
Mark, your turn.
All right, thanks. And I'm glad to be a part of this. So I also have this, it's a bit of a mixed background. And so my main work, my main job has been to be a spiritual teacher, leader of a Christian community. I've lived in a few different places, but I'm right now near Minneapolis, Minnesota. For about 5 years, I worked with a therapist and an author in recovery work, leading recovery workshops. I was a director of training for this organization, and then pivoted back into church work. So I've written a few articles in magazines, and so when I was working with the people, or with this person's name is Mark Laser, when I was working with him, we were approached to write a chapter of a book. And so basically I wrote it, and then he said, looks good. And it was, co-authored then. That's how that always works, right? He had the bigger name, so I wrote the book and then he signed his name on it. And so that was actually, I should say, a chapter of a book, a compendium. And then for the longest time, I've wanted to write a book. In fact, as we were beginning here, I was just talking about how I was connecting to a literary agent, and that didn't, I wasn't sure what I was going to write at that point, and so I kind of drifted away. And then I wanted to write a book because I started to do leadership coaching for other spiritual leaders, and so I was exploring all the different options, and I settled with an organization. It's I think I'd call it a hybrid. It's kind of like a training organization that works with authors and holds their hand to do the publishing process. And they're called Mission Publishing, and so I published my book with them. It's called Leaving Your Mark Without Losing Your Mind. And so what happened for me is that as I was doing this work, I realized this is not just something that spiritual leaders need, but a lot of people who have a desire to make an impact in their, in their world, in their community, but things get in the way. So kind of what happened was I started the book with one focus, working again, this niche of spiritual leaders, and then it sort of broadened. And anyway, so that book came out in 2018. And right at that time, we'll get into this later, I suppose, but right at that time, when the book came out, then I was, an organization reached out to me, unconnected to the book, but to move. I was in Chicago at the time, and the idea was to move and back here to Minnesota, where family is located. And so my wife and I did a big move, and so kind of changed the trajectory of what I was doing, and I didn't really do the launch and promote the book in the way that I had initially planned, because that kind of life pulled me in a different direction. So anyway, that's what happened with that book. I have since just self-published a small book, basically just an ebook. And then along the way, also another organization reached out to me, that, how Bibles, they're Bibles for everything these days. There's Bibles for, a Bible for fisher people, a Bible for people for teen girls, a Bible for this or that. There's specialty Bibles. So anyway, there was a specialty Bible being made for spiritual leaders, and they reached out to me, and I basically you write a few articles, and then they include the articles in certain places in the Bible. So it's called the Ministry Essentials Bible. So I have a couple of articles in there. So that's my foray of, it's kind of a variety of things with publishing, mix of self-publishing and traditional publishing.
All right, it's now my turn. So my entire experience with publishing, it started out, and I'm going to be the first to say, I did not consider myself an author, nor did I desire to be an author. That has come since I did my 2018 Life Vision, and Missy challenged me in my vision work. So that's what happens when you sit in a room with Missy for 4 days and she hears the entire 12 categories coming out of your mouth as we go around and talk about it when you do it in person. And so my experience started off as working for a literary agency. I am a really great editor. I can see where things need to be tweaked. I can see where things don't flow well. I can get that book polished into the right flow so that it stays in the right message. And the kitchen sink has not been tossed into that book, because there are two types of authors. One who want to put everything into one book. And the other type is that they don't put enough into one book because they think they need to have 10 books, and maybe that's not such a good plan either. So I was a really good literary agency. I spent lots of time editing. And then came along my time in Chicago with Missy. It was the last group that Missy took through Lifebook. And so 4 days with Missy, not John. It was a very different experience. And what I learned was that she looked at me and she's like, if you want to have a publishing company, don't you think you should be an author first? Have you put yourself in the author hot seat so that you can actually help authors even better than what you already do? And so I did. I went out on Facebook and I found some different anthologies that were being created, and I volunteered to write a chapter, much like Mark did, in a book. And my name, again, is not on the cover, but it is in the book. And I've since had five. Yes, I have since done 5 of those, because 2,500 word chapters are pretty easy to write, in my opinion. And but it also helped me being in the hot seat of having somebody else edit my work. So now I have a lot more understanding of how to do better editing for those people that I'm actually doing the editing work for. And so that kind of has shaped my direction since 2018, and it's been a really great experience. And I've enjoyed it to the point where I actually have decided that I am an author as well as an editor. We'll see about the publishing part. I'm still stepping into that part of it and trying to really figure out how that's going to work. But I have 9 years until I can retire from my 9-to-5 job. So I have 9 years to figure it out at this point. So we did have some questions that we do want to cover first. And so Anna and Mark, I'm going to ask these questions to both of you because you two have had totally different experiences. And again, I will answer them as well, but I'm going to be the facilitator at this point for the questions. So we did talk about the how did you decide to write a book, but what was it that actually nudged you to the point where you actually hit the publish button?
Sorry, repeat the question again. What actually nudged you to publish it?
Actually hit that publish button instead of, I mean, obviously, you know, we all are like, okay, we can write this, but then to actually say, yes, we're going to put it out there for the rest of the world to actually read. What got you over that hump to do it?
If you don't mind, I can start, Anna, because I have a very specific moment for me. I think I mentioned that that I had, published a chapter. I published different in this certain book with my co-author. I had written articles in magazines, and I had, been going back and forth on should I write a book or not? What should I write about? And some pivoting in my career. And it was actually a phone consultation with John Egan, who's the director of Mission Publishing. That's the kind of the boutique or hybrid publisher that I went with. And he asked me this question, and it's a very basic question, but it just hit me at the time. He said, "Mark, what would you do if you knew you could not fail?" Um, and and it was just like that. If it would work, yeah, I'd write a book. I would. And that's kind of what got me in touch with the fact that I really did have that passion in me to do this. And so that's what then started the journey.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think that a lot of people actually would have this aha moment in their life. I think for me, it was slightly different because, like I said, well, I never had intention of writing a book. In fact, when I was writing the ebook to start with, I just before my horse riding accident, I was actually gearing up for quite a big retreat that I was running for business people, and what I started to do is through this ebook, I was starting to gather more information, and then I've realized that this event is going to be so intense that it might be worthwhile for me to actually create an ebook or some kind of a book to give them so they can get the basics out of the way so we can concentrate on real stuff. But when I started writing, it was just so I really don't know what I tapped into, but it was just almost like just got into a flow, and I started to write, and I've realized this is not just an ebook, it's quite big. And I tend to look at things, like if I'm going to start something, I want to do it all the way. When I was doing I did live work, and one of the things in the intellectual, you had to put some goals. So I'm like, oh, what am I going to do intellectually? And I thought, how about I write a book? So how about I actually publish the whole thing? And so that's what actually started. So setting up that goal and actually making a decision to do it. And then knowing that, one of the things that I have is obsession to completion. If I start something, I need to finish it. So that sort of was the driving force behind it. But it was actually a decision that I made through Livebook that let's just publish it. I don't know how to write it. I don't know anything about it, but let's find out. So just be playful with it and go with the flow.
Yeah, and I obviously just said Missy was the one who nudged me to actually do something. So for me, I guess I needed somebody to give me that nudge, and actually, much like Mark, Missy's like, you're writing this entire life book. What do you mean you're not an author? Why can't you just look at it that way? You already are an author. Just publish. Just get something published. Do the whole process. So that was what actually got me to step into the author shoes from the editor shoes. So the next question is, did you get help along the way? And who did you reach out for that help? So, so Anna and Mark, do you want to?
Mark, do you want to take a lead on this?
Yeah, well, so a couple of places. I mean, I really just sort of put myself out there to try to get some magazine articles published. And that was, just reading some books about how to write magazine articles and how to write proposals and that sort of stuff. And I did that. And then what helped me, I suppose, working as a director of training with Faithful and True, or with Mark Laser, and he had published a number of books, was sort of well known in the certain niche, and so that was helpful. Just sort of, yeah, if he can do it, this is how he does it, that sort of thing. But I guess the most help that I guess I got was through Mission Publishing, and them. I mean, I've got binders of stuff about how to do it, and how to work with editors, how to a process for, how to get it out on paper, how to, anyway, I will say one thing. I did want to bring this up. Again, this is from John Egan. I think it was really helpful for me at least, and it might be helpful for some of you. He really challenged me, as he does all the people he works with. Is his challenge was, don't. And again, maybe Anna and Catherine, you guys would have a different view on this, but this is what he said, and it's resonated for me. He said, don't think about your book as the end goal. He said, think of your book is a strategy or a tool to get you to something else. So what do you want? And like, so he said, people think, naive people think, I'm going to write this book, I'm going to sell a lot of copies, I'm going to make a lot of money with it. And very, very few people that actually works. But what happens is you get a book, and if you have a platform, or you're selling some sort of service, you do coaching, you do whatever, the book, helps you get to that other point, or, helps you accomplish that other thing. So like in the book, like he made sure that we would put in something about some sort of call to action. Hey, if you want to have more information about such and such, go to my website and get this or that. And for me, then I also use it as a way of trying to get speeches and stuff. But again, to, like, his whole thing was, don't start your book unless you know, or until you know what you want that book to do for you, for your career, for your mission, whatever. And then that purpose helps shape, everything you're doing. So that was also helpful to me. Yeah, and that's one of the things I wanted to share with this group.
Totally agree with you, Mike. Actually, before I start, Susan's got her hand up. Do you want to ask a question, Susan?
So I wanted to ask a question, and I liked that was the question that sort of kind of is in there, is if I've already figured out how to do the self-publishing, should that motivate me to continue in the idea of going for a book? Because like I was gonna ask, like, how, I don't know, it's the question that you just asked, but it was like sort of a little bit of tweak for me.
Yeah, I'll answer this, Susan. Thank you. Great question. Look, and I totally agree with Mark. Unless you actually have a reason, okay, if you don't have a reason behind why you're doing things, you will not have enough fuel to finish it. Okay, it's like getting into a car without a destination. If you don't know what the destination is, halfway through you're going to go, I'm just driving in circles. Why am I driving? Wasting fuel. Okay, so it's the same thing with these. Just build enough why, build enough reason why you're doing something, and having a purpose where it's not the book is just a journey. The book is not the actual end all and be all. And I think that the biggest mistake that people make is they put all the bets on one book, and they think it needs to be a bestseller. I need to make millions of dollars with it. Fantastic book. I highly recommend reading is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. When she talks about this explicitly, she says, the biggest creativity killer is when you actually put so much pressure on yourself that this has to be a bestseller. Okay, if you start thinking of this as just simply an expression of what it is that you would like to get out to the world, give out to the world, and your contribution to the world, then you'll have much more chance of actually making this into something incredible. And allowing this playfulness to come through, and just, rather than having this strict how, okay, don't concentrate on how. Get your why strong enough, okay, why you're doing this, and having a purpose behind, like what Mark was saying, I kind of look at books these days, now after I've done it, and I kind of look at it more as a glorified business card. It really is. It's sort of, rather than thinking about it, I'm going to make millions of dollars, great. If it becomes a bestseller, fantastic. If I make millions, fantastic. That is not my purpose. Okay, my purpose is to actually bring something to people's, like, whoever's going to pick it up, I want to be able to change their life in some way. And I want to be able to, give them as much value as I can. And obviously, you don't want to write massive book that no one will pick up. So if there is something that you can help them with later on. So if you do have a business or you're thinking about a business, having a book, one thing that it did for me, because in the past I used to work in businesses. So all my clients would come in referral base. Okay, I was making a lot of money, but it was just simply because they saw results in one business and they're like, can you help this person? Or that person will ring, and it was by recommendation only. So I would only take on a client if somebody recommended them. So it was a totally different business model. But what I've realized was that with this kind of knowledge that I was sharing in the book was anybody really needs it. Like you need to know how to get through all this self-sabotage, stresses, anxieties, how to get rid of all of that so you can really work in the flow. And I thought anyone can benefit from it. So let's just change the business model. Now, I had no idea what the book will actually start. And my whole Quantum Mind Academy was just an extension of the book, because after the book, everybody just came in and was like, how do I know more? Tell me more, tell me more. So the whole business was built around it. But the intention when I started with the book was, okay, the book will be just an opening, will be a beginning to something special. I didn't know what that special thing was. I just knew that I was on a mission to help humans in a certain way with the skills that I had. So if I could just give you any advice, forget about how, okay? The how will show up as soon as you know why you're doing it, and you have strong enough belief, and don't put the whole thing that you're doing, don't put it onto the book, okay? The book is just an expression, okay? Whether it's done through a webinar, whether it's done through a book, whether it's done for an ebook, for an article, it doesn't matter how, okay? But what is your message? What is the contribution that you want to make to the world? Okay, so think about that. Once you get clear about this, the how will show up.
And I totally agree with Anna there. And I'm going to talk about it from the literary agent's standpoint and the editor standpoint instead of the author standpoint. As a literary agent, and this takes me back so 20 some odd years ago, almost 30 at this point. The literary agency that I worked for had Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield as their biggest clients. They came to the literary agency and said, we want to do Chicken Soup for the Soul. I'm not sure that that was exactly what the original title was, but the main literary agent, even though he thought it was a wonderful idea, flat out told them there was not a publisher in the country that was going to pick up that book. So we represented another book that they did called The Aladdin Factor, which was amazing. And it's a beautiful book. And I thoroughly love that book in itself. But they decided that because of the fact that nobody was going to pick up Chicken Soup for the Soul, they were self-publishing it. So that became their business card. And they would have that book at every single speaking event that they had. After a couple of years, suddenly this publisher wants to pick it up because they've sold so many self-published copies of it. So again, they knew even 20 some odd years ago that they needed that Chicken Soup for the Soul, and that concept of a book was a really important book for our country and for the world, because we need those uplifting stories. We don't get those on the news. We don't see those, not that Facebook was in existence at that point, but that's not necessarily what you see on Facebook all the time. And so they knew, they had a deep why that they wanted to make this really huge difference and give people uplifting stories that were real people's stories, not, just happy fiction stories. And so they had a really deep why as to why to do Chicken Soup for the Soul, and it propelled them forward. And as an editor, I can tell which people have a really deep why because they get their books edited and done. So I just finished editing this book. It launched yesterday. Yeah, it launched yesterday. It's called Unfiltered. I posted about it in membership. Literally, that author gave me the book in December and we were ready to go last week, editing and everything done. I have another client I've been working with for 2 years at this point, and it still is not done because the why is not deep enough. It really, you have to have a why. Not just because and the why could just be you have a story that you know is going to help one other person on this planet, and you don't know who that person is, but you need to give that help to that person. You need to give that inspirational story to that person. You need to give that knowledge. It doesn't have to be a 10 million people type of book. Maybe it's a 10-person type of book, but you have that deep why, knowing that that book is what needs to be out there into the world. Because we need to share our stories with the world so people can heal themselves. I mean, that's one of the beauties of books. They might not be able to talk to you one-on-one, but they can find your book. And the people who find your book are the ones who need your book, is the way I view it. So that just happens to be, my big thing as a literary agent, former literary agent and editor now, is that I really truly believe that everybody has a book, but if you don't have a deep why as to why that book needs to be out there, you don't have the motivation to get it done. So
that's really well said, Catherine. And if I can just add something to it, one of the biggest things that I find people, what stops them from actually writing it, let's say, for example, they want to do something on personal development or spirituality or anything that they're really interested in. You look around and you go, there's a book published every second. There's so many books on this topic, okay? Why is mine going to be different? Why? Because it's you, okay? Your voice has never been added to the story. So, and like when I actually, went onto this journey, I had no idea what sort of impact it will have on other people. Till this day, I get people from all over the world that I've never met sending me messages saying you've just changed my life. Now, I can tell you that this is just the most beautiful feeling you'll ever get. To be able to help somebody that you've never even met. So, I think that keeping that story within you is almost selfish. It's like share it with the world. Okay, whatever story it is, however it's going to come out, it's your voice behind it. Some people might, Mike will talk to them and they will get it. Okay, I will talk to them, somebody else will get it. Catherine will talk to them, somebody else will get it. Susan will say something and it will just work for that particular person. So don't be selfish, get it into the world. Don't keep it for yourself.
Yes, definitely. Totally agree with that, because I would say that is the one thing that I do see a difference, and I'm tossing this out here right now. So if there are questions about it, you all can think about it as we get closer to doing some question and answer. There is a difference between doing traditional publishing and self-publishing and how your story ends up coming across in the end. So that is a consideration, because you as an author are going to have to make a choice as to whether you're okay with one route or the other route, or you do one route and then maybe the other route comes over at some point. But it is something to kind of keep in mind as to how you want your voice to come across. So, so our next question is, what were the biggest hurdles and how did you overcome them?
Mark, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can start. And I think there's probably two levels of this. The first one, I was in a situation that I'm going to guess probably a lot of us are, where I have a day job. And it's in some ways related, but largely unrelated to this work that I'm doing. And just time and how to keep going. I mean, yeah, there's this, I think Grant Cardone has this book where it's called 10X. And the idea is that whatever project you want to do, whatever business you want to start, think how much it's going to cost, how hard it's going to be, and just assume it's going to take 10 times that. And that's maybe exaggerating, but my experience with writing pretty much every single one of these projects, whatever I assumed it was going to take in terms of time and energy, it turned out to be more. It was longer. It was more challenging. And, you know, I think that's what I've heard from other writers as well, that, you know, there's a reason that everyone wants to write a book and so few people do, right? Because I want to really affirm what I think it was Catherine said, you got to get your why, because that's what's going to sustain you through that process, right? So that's the one challenge that I've had. I think the other one, I don't know, you know, how life unfolds, and I've pivoted to different things, and so because of that, you know, so I have this book, and I'm kind of focusing on a different thing now than what this book is. But on the other hand, it's out there and people are still benefiting, and it still sells. And when I go speak, you know, people can buy it. So that's good. That's all. Okay. Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, yeah, it's really great. Look, I think the hurdles, wow, there was a few. First of all, like I said, I've got no experience in writing. You know, English is my second language. I didn't learn it till I was 16 or 18. So it was like, how do I do this? And also having no experience whatsoever, and sort of being really scattered in my mind of exactly what this was going to be. So the you know, one of the things that I put a strategy in place is obviously the reason why am I doing it? What's the purpose? So I've imagined myself being on the other side, being the reader, what I would like to gain out of this, okay, if I was the reader. You know, I guess the hurdles was obviously just doing the research. My biggest hurdle, Catherine, I wish I knew back then, because my editor was actually my biggest hurdle. So, you know, I wrote what I wrote, and I hired somebody who, in the past, I used to run a magazine, and she was my head editor, and I actually gave it to her to edit. Now, when I finished, everything seemed all great. And what I've done, which was really, if you can just write this down, this is the best trick ever. I didn't even think of it as a trick. I just wanted to get some feedback before I published the book. So I got onto a few of my networks, and, you know, because I was doing all these online seminars when I had time off, you know, some of those networks were quite big, and I just said, you know, is there anyone that can help me with just giving me feedback on a book? I'm just about to publish, and in fact, I was cheeky. I said it's going to be a new bestseller. Somebody made a comment on that, and I said, you got to believe it first, right? So, but yeah, so I've had a lot of people that volunteer to edit, and I've actually asked people to come in with, if they actually have background in psychology, because my book, I'm not a psychologist, but the book is actually quite based on psychology. So I said, anybody that can rip it to shreds, please let me know. I'd rather do it now before I publish it. So I've had quite a few people that have applied, and what I was absolutely shocked about, I was expecting that, you know, some will say, well, you can't say these, or you need to do more research on that. I was expecting. What I didn't expect is a lot of people came back and say spelling mistake, grammar mistake, this mistake, and I was mortified. I was so embarrassed about it, because I thought, well, you know, I've just paid somebody a lot of money to do a really good job. So all these people came back to me, and I printed the whole book, and I had highlight after highlight. Every single person was sending me either emails or, you know, it was just like coming everywhere. I think I had about 80 people I think it was 80 people that were helping me out with, and I had all these highlighted sections. But overall, you know, everybody was saying, hey, that's the best thing I've ever read. Get it out there, but just fix those spelling mistakes. So, and somebody said, you know, I wouldn't even pick it up because, you know, I couldn't get past the first chapter because of the grammar mistakes. So this was my biggest hurdle, finding a really good editor. So I ended up, you know, hiring another person who fixed it all up and just made it, you know, but the amount of changes that we made, literally almost every single paragraph had changes to the grammar of it. So I guess that was probably my biggest hurdle, the biggest mistake. But I'll pat myself on the back for reaching out to people and say, hey, listen, give me feedback. And just being really open-minded about the feedback and seeing, because you see things from one perspective. When you get feedback from a lot of people, you actually start seeing it from different point of view, and just being able to rework it and work on it again. Also, look, I think that was probably the biggest hurdle. It wasn't necessarily about the writing itself. I do agree with Mark. If you have a full-time job, it does require time. I had 4 months off, so I was just like, I just got to do something, otherwise I'm going to go crazy. So this was a motivation for me, but it was just write things down and find how to structure it. So, there's knowing what I know now, and I'm sure Mark will say the same thing. If we had to do it again, it wouldn't take us long. It would be so much quicker, because there are so many different shortcuts that we can share with you. But publishing, from publishing perspective, editing was probably my biggest hurdle.
Can I jump in again, Catherine?
Of course, Mark, please do.
I want to echo what you said, Anna, kind of on both counts. So this is the book, Leaving Your Mark Without Losing Your Mind, right? I had 2 different editors go through it. And of course, you're making changes. And the book is out, and it has a typo. I'm not kidding you. It has a typo in the table of contents. I want to murder somebody when I find this out. We can change it now, but whatever. It's crazy how I can't. It's how that stuff happens, because you're changing stuff, and then the editor looks at that, but then you make some other change, and the editor doesn't see that. So it's like way more challenging than I realized, that part of it. So totally with you on that one, Anna. And I want to also affirm what you said about sending out, I don't know what you call it, but sample copies for review. And this was what John Egan had us do, and I would highly recommend it. He said, for each chapter, write your chapter, and then find, let's say 5 to 10 people in your field. And ideally, maybe you could write your chapter, edit it, and then get it so that you don't have typos that they're going to be finding. But then send it to some people and you can ask them for their feedback on it. And what happens is, the idea is that, again, particularly if it's people in your field and people that you might want to get a quote from down the line, who might give you an endorsement, if they have had a hand in seeing what you've written and maybe even giving you feedback, they're going to be even more willing to give you an endorsement down the line. And yes, that worked for me. There were people, I kind of went, had mid-tier people and then upper tier people, so some looked at it, some didn't. But there were some that, gave me good feedback and then gave me good reviews or gave me an endorsement down the line. So that idea, that I don't know how you thought of that yourself, Anna. That's a great strategy, and I would definitely do that again.
Yeah, I've sort of looked at it from a business model, having experience in business and marketing. That's pretty much, it's always great to get feedback from your end client, which is the end reader. Yeah.
And I'm going to add to that. There were 9 of us that posted in Marketplace, I don't know how many months ago, probably back in December, that we needed readers for our advanced readers copy of Soul Journey, which is still not out because there were parts of each story that we were going through. And as the editor, because I knew the authors really well, I could hear their voices in my head as I was reading. So some of the things that were resonating with me didn't make sense to people who did not have those authors' voices actually in their head. So we had to go back and do some revamping of each of the short stories. And in my case, I didn't worry about the advanced readers copy about the typos. we got lots of comments on some of the typos, but the reason I didn't worry about it, because those are the last things after all the edits are done that I want to go back and fix to make sure that the spacing is right and the periods are there. And because there's nothing more frustrating for me as doing the last proofreading, that I've done all these hours of proofreading and then something has to be edited a whole bunch, and then I've got to go back and do the same amount of proofreading again. So in my case, I would prefer to just let those typos be in advanced reader's copy. No, I'm going to get all those comments back, and it just confirms that, yes, I saw that and I didn't fix it because I want, like I highlight it on my Word document version to go back and fix it, but I don't want to fix it in what I send out as the advanced reader's copy, because if something doesn't resonate, if there's a whole paragraph that needs to be totally rewritten because it makes no sense, there's no point in me spending hours doing all those little fixes until the very end. So there are different ways that different editors do that. I'm more of an editor that goes in the flow versus trying to get it all right the first time, because I'm one who goes back and we go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until it is right. Because I would rather have the right wording versus the right punctuation at the beginning. So there are lots of different ways to do that. But I do agree, advanced readers copies are the way to go before you self-publish. You can post them just about anywhere. There are writers groups out on Facebook that volunteer to do advanced readers. You can just put it on your normal Facebook page. Although I will tell you personally, having your friends read your book is not a good plan. You want people who are not related to you and don't know you in any way, shape, or form, because you'll get a much better read than if you have your best friend read it. So just keep that in mind as well when you're getting ready to do the editing part. So,
and Catherine, if I could just add something to it, like when I actually wrote the book, like I said, this was a beginning of something. Now, I didn't know exactly what this ending will be, but I knew that there was just an opening for, something that I'd like to create in the future to be able to help and guide these people. And what I have found is that of those, initially, I think it was about 80 people that put their hand out, and I think probably half of them finished on time because I gave them really, really tight schedule. I said, you got to do it within a week. So, obviously some people were just too busy, but those ones that finished, I knew that they were really serious about, giving the feedback. A lot of them actually became my clients after that. And what I have done is when I've created something, I actually told them, I said, listen, I said, thank you. I'd love to give this to you as a gift. Okay, I'm not going to charge you, or I think I've charged them a small amount, just a token, so I knew that they were serious. But I said, I'm creating a beta group that will go through a program, and you give me feedback. So the only thing that I don't want you paying for it, but I want you feedback, constant feedback, so I know how to improve it. And this was, and it was just like a jumping start for Quantum Mind Academy. And it's just gone crazy now, but that is what I started with. And those people are till this day my closest friends right now, because they're constantly, even if they've finished the program, they're still, hey, I've got a referral, I've got this, or what else can I do to help out with their business? So some of them even became part of the company to help me. So I highly recommend doing that. Total strangers, and I wanted the biggest skeptics out there in the world to come in, because I knew that if I can get skeptics across the line, then everything else is going to be easy.
Yeah, I definitely agree. At this point, I think we would like to take some questions if anybody has questions. I am planning, while you're thinking about questions, I am planning for Anna, Mark, and I to come up with some sort of roadmap, kind of as to which way, what made each of us decide to go traditional or self-publishing, or like just a quick little document that we can put up with the recording. So, because I do think that there are many differences between traditional and self-publishing and everything in between. And I want to make sure that we do have time for those answers. So if anybody has a question, please raise your hand. I'm going to minimize my document so that I can actually see everybody. And yes, Susan, I see your hand is raised.
Okay, so if we chose self-publishing, what comes in, like, you just put it up there and just hope for the best, or where's the advertising
Mommy,
and getting people to find
Mommy,
it part?
look at this fruit. Mommy, they
Actually, Susan, I will tell you that there are a lot of different ways to market your book. There are lots of different ways to promote your book. It all depends ultimately what you're really comfortable with. I will actually, as part, I don't want to tell you the wrong spellings of some of these websites because it's late enough at night for me that I am likely to be flipping letters because I do that when I get really tired. So I will be posting up, I will put some of those links up with our recording so that you actually can go and find out some more about book marketing. I would say that that is not one of my specialties, but I know which marketers seem to resonate better with me than some others. So, but there are a lot of different ways to market your book. There is there is a putting it up there and just hoping for the best, but that doesn't get you very far, much like anything else. And I'm sure Anna and Mark will be able to elaborate on some of the other other thoughts that go along with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I mostly did is market to the email list that I have, and then any speaking events that I have. And part of the next level was, seeking to get into podcasts and other, other things to just build my name in the field. But once again, that got a little complicated in that I sort of shifted my niche or niche, however you say that. But so, if you think about Chicken Soup for the Soul is the classic example. But again, I keep mentioning his name, John Egan, my editor at Mission Publishing. He talks about, he did some study, and it was on a number of bestseller books, how many of them actually became bestsellers over time. In other words, not just a huge launch, but it was if the authors cared about, loved the theme, and were dedicated to it. So they were out there speaking, having events, doing this and that, and then selling their stuff at those events. That's how the word got around. So you can do a launch, which I did, and it was a successful launch. We were like I was the, what is it, best new book or top selling new book for a day on Amazon, but that, of course, that goes away pretty quick. You launch, that's great, but then it's what happens after that. And that's how the speaking and podcasts and, other mailing that you do, that's kind of what I focused on. I don't know. How about you, Anna?
Yeah, look, I think that this is where a lot of people think that, you just write a book and put it in a bookshop, in a bookstore, and it will just sell. Okay, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of books being published constantly. So, how do you differentiate yourself? Now, this sort of comes back to the question, should you go with a publisher? Should you go with self-publishing? Now, I personally don't have any experience with a publishing company. And I took the road of self-publishing. And the reason why I've done it is I actually tapped into a lot of, so first of all, I spoke to a lot of authors, tracked down anyone that I could even hear about that has written a book, and I would track them down. If it's a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, before you know, I'll be tracking them down. Can I borrow half an hour of your time? I'm just writing a book right now and I've got no idea what I'm doing. I just need to ask a couple of questions. Would you mind? Okay. People are very, very helpful. if you reach out, okay, you'll get a lot of shortcuts. Okay, so highly, if you're writing a book, highly recommend. Even just reach out to Mark or I. Happy to help you with this. So, but the reason why I chose to go self-publishing route is I got onto a podcast. So there was a podcast that I was listening to. I can't remember the name, but I'll get back to Catherine about it. But it was fantastic because the gentleman was interviewing a whole bunch of authors that have chosen either one or the other. And the interviews that I've listened to, a lot of them actually regretted going the publishing way. Okay, and the reason why is, first of all, publisher, unless you have a very big name in industry, so if you're an actor or somebody who already is very well known, they'll pick you up no problem. Okay, and they will put a lot of funds into it. Okay, when you come in and you've never written anything before and you're not known in the market, okay, they will ask you, how big is your database? Okay, and the reason why they ask you that is because they want you to market. They want to take their cut and then market to your own database. Now, when I heard that, I thought, that's crazy. Why would I do that? Okay, I can write to my own database. That's not an issue. Okay, in fact, at that time, I didn't have a database. So, but what they are saying is, let me take a cut from whatever you're going to create, and you have to do the hard work. You still have to do the legwork. So I figured, you know what? Let me just do the legwork. But if I'm going to do it, if I'm going to take it on by myself, okay, and because there was somebody who was on the interview who was actually in publishing, and what they were saying is, if they have, let's say, 5 authors that they're taking on that particular month, the funds that they have, distribution of funds, will go towards the one that they're betting on, the one that already has a name, has written books before. Okay, this is why the Chicken Soup of the Soul weren't interested in the first book. Okay, but when they actually saw that it was selling, okay, they go, oh, they got a database. Let us step into that. Okay, so from that perspective, from a business model perspective, I thought it didn't make sense. Okay, if I require to have a database to be represented by somebody, let me just do it myself. Okay, so this was my decision. Ingram Sparks is a company that I've published through. They have a really good website where they actually will give you step-by-step, how to go through the process of publishing. So there is quite a few things. You need to design your covers, cover for the book, and Elance. Just write it down. Elance is a website where there's a lot of people who do different things. So it could be accountants, could be just people that have skills all over the world. Okay, so you just simply put it out there and say, I want something designed, and this is my budget. Okay, and you'll get people that are actually bidding for it, and you can choose a person. So now I had a little bit of background in magazine publishing, so I had a few contacts here and there, but a lot of people that I ended up working with were new people. So, just don't be afraid. Don't think about the how, okay? Like I said, get your why strong enough, get this power, because I'll tell you what, having this in my hands, I have achieved a lot through business and done a lot of things, but having this in my hands when it actually finally arrived and holding it in my hand, it's like holding my firstborn. Okay, like for women that had children, okay, this was like having a child, seriously. I was almost crying when I actually flicked through it, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got a book. Okay, I don't care if it sells, I've got a book. Okay, and it was just such a joyous experience. Even just if you just do it for the sake of getting something as an end product, it's so worth it. So it's definitely a beautiful journey. But yeah, so I chose the self-publishing route because of the fact that I didn't have the big name in the industry, and I didn't want to go down the route. Now, one of the things with self-publishing is that this is printed on demand. So Ingram Sparks will print, let's say, for example, if my book is on Amazon right now, so if you order a hard copy, they will print it in whatever country you're in. Okay, so that's really, really helpful, because if I was to send you this book from Australia, it will cost me in postage more than the book itself. Okay, it's ridiculous. So it will actually print it in US, in Europe, wherever you are. obviously ebooks. You've got Elance, also has people that can take the word document, translate it into an ebook format. They can translate it into the format that would be required for Ingram Sparks. Just mention, okay, this is the company I'm dealing with. Can you just format it the right way? Okay, so you get a lot of people along the way that can help you with these. But one thing about self-publishing is, and especially the great thing about printing on demand, is if I find a spelling mistake in this, Mark, you would know this, right? Instead of having 5,000 copies in my garage or 10,000 copies, I can just literally go in. It costs me, I think, $50 to amend anything on there, and I can just fix up typos. In fact, what I love about this is anything that I've put in, like a free gift within the book so they follow to the website. As the business evolved, there were more and more products that I was creating, and I wanted to add something else in here. Okay, so it was just very easy. Sometimes I would get a feedback from somebody that wrote the book and say, I don't understand, what do you mean by this? Or, I don't like the language that was being used. I'm a straight shooter, so I tell you how I think, like it's written the way that I talk. So, sometimes I might be a little bit blunt. So, sometimes I'll get feedback and go, people getting angry about this. And it's like, let me think about it. You just didn't get the message that I was trying to get through. But fair enough, there are some people that might get offended by something. So I would go back and change the actual wording in the book. So this was a really, really good way of actually starting. Now, the negative about this is it cost me about $20 to print, to actually get this book printed. Now, in Australia, if I was to sell a book in a bookshop, it costs $29. Okay, in this genre, roughly 29, under $30 of Australian dollars. Now, for a bookshop to pick this up, they need to make 100% profit. So let me think. Cost of printing is $20. They'll need to load it up to $40 for the bookshop to sell it. Where's my profit? There is no profit. Okay, so it's a very expensive way of doing it, but you don't have this expense. I can spend $500 and I can have a whole bunch of books printed out that are just sitting on my shelf, and I can just use them. And like I said, it is just a glorified business card. Okay, so when you go to Amazon right now and you order my book, I get $1, maybe $1 too, because Amazon has to take its cut as well. So it's not a money making machine unless it gets picked up by millions of people. Okay, so if it becomes super popular, even if you make $1 per book, that's $1 million, right? So that's when you start making money. But what's really smart is to really create something beyond the book. Okay, so let's say if you have a business model, let's say if you're a coach and if you want to do some coaching, include something in here to get people to it. One thing that I've added in my book is I created a ebook or a PDF document, which is a journal that goes with this. Okay, so you're actually doing exercises as you're doing it. Now, for you to download this, you have to go to my website. So you've got website address, and you go to the website and you have to download it. Now, for you to download it, you put in your email address, collects database. Okay, so now I can correspond with you if I wanted to. Does that make sense? Sorry, I didn't mean to hog the time, but.
No, actually, I think it's really good because you brought up some really amazing and important points about the self-publishing, and being on the literary agent side of it, I'm going to, I will kind of address where the balance is for me on it, because it really depends on whether you want to be doing all the lead work or not. If you go with a traditional publisher, which again, they're looking, literally, they want you to have at least 100,000 followers on Facebook, Instagram, and whatever other social media you have total. So you need to have 100,000 before they will actually give you sort of an advance, because otherwise they're not making money on it, because they want to have New York Times bestsellers. And because they want the New York Times bestsellers, they need to have at least 10 to 20,000 copies sold that first week. That's the way, at least that's the way the publishers in the United States work. I will not say that's necessarily the way they are around the world, but I'm pretty sure that they all have similar models because it's the way the publishing industry has evolved into. You can get a literary agent, which happens to be a middle person between you and a publisher. And that means what ends up happening is the literary agent knows who to actually take your book to, so that you might actually get that traditional publishing contract. The kicker there is that the literary agent is then going to take a cut of your profits from the publishing company. So the publishing company doesn't give you money until they've broken even, and then the literary agent gets some percentage of the check that you get. And so you're paying them consistently for whatever books you sell. So again, there's a benefit to having the literary agent. They'll have an editor. They know who to take it to for acquisition at the publishing houses, but you're paying for all of that up front. I mean, you're not paying for it necessarily up front, but you're going to be paying for it continuously every time you have a book sold. So there is kind of a difference. The other part about the traditional publisher that I don't really, which is why I did stop working for the literary agency, because after a while, I just didn't like the feel of it anymore. Authors would have their voice. And much like Anna says, she writes like she talks. That's what's really powerful about people's books and messages. But when you get to the traditional publisher, they need to sell the book. So they're going to water it down and make it into this bland, easier to sell and market book, because they know what sells for the people who buy their books. And so they become more cookie cutter in sound, and some of the messages just kept getting lost. Like half the message of the book was disappearing. And after a while, I just was like, it was actually kind of making me sick to my stomach after a little while. Like that feeling was just not a good feeling, which is why I decided just to be an editor and edit anybody's book who wanted it edited, instead of me staying in the publishing world in the capacity that I was, because it really didn't fit for me. The one thing I can say is, if you are going to go to a literary agent, or you are going to go to a traditional publisher, you do need to write a book proposal. And I'm using this because the literary agent that I actually work for wrote this, and this one is the original version. They have a second edition out. It's called How to Write the Perfect Book Proposal. It has 10 different examples in it, and it is really amazing. And so I will put links to it out there so that you can find it if you want it. Merritt, thank you for coming. If you have questions, because we are about 15 minutes over, Dorinda, we will still take yours, but for everybody else, do underneath the event in the comments, if you have questions that come up in the next couple days, put them underneath the event, and then Anna, Mark, and I will get questions answered so that we have them underneath the article recording. So yes, we will be posting all of these links into the Facebook app when I put the recording up as the article. And when I put that up, then I will make sure everybody's notified. So that's that's going to be the good thing.
Someone had said in the comments that they couldn't find my book. Well, you should find it. It should be on Amazon. Both of my books on Amazon. So, and we'll get those links. Yeah, go ahead, Dorinda.
That was me that said I couldn't find it because I wasn't looking on Amazon. I work for an independent bookstore, and so I try to find places other than Amazon that support indies. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate Amazon. I really do. They are prolific and they are affordable and they're great, but I try to do both. And as far as my question is, it's my understanding publishing can be really different between nonfiction and fiction. I'm a fiction writer, and you know, the thing about platform and you know, how many followers you have can be different, and what a potential agent wants to see. They want a full manuscript, whereas with nonfiction, they want the proposal. So I wanted to ask about that. And the other thing is also with literary agents, it's my understanding that if a literary agent wants to charge you anything up front, you need to run screaming because they're not legit. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, the literary agent side, I will say yes, because normally what happens when they decide to pick you up, the contract you sign says they will get 15% or 20% of whatever your check is for some of them do per how many copies. So maybe after 5,000 copies, they consider that done and over with, and then you get full royalty checks. But
Which means it's there.
but I would say but if they are asking for money up front, I would say that they are not, I'm not going to say that they're not legit, but they have a different business model that doesn't make me comfortable. If that, because in some cases it might be that they are asking for some money up front to see whether you're really serious. But I would say if they're asking you for, now, if they're saying, the money we're charging you is so that we can have an editor go through your book because they don't have an editor on staff. So like the literary agency that I work for, we were editors on staff. So that made a difference. They were already paying me a salary, so they didn't have to go out and get an editor, but some literary agents don't have an editor on staff, and they then have to pay an editor to go through your book before. And especially with fiction, because the publishers really want it more done than not done. And so with the fiction, they do want an editor, and they want it mostly almost perfectly edited before it goes, which means that it might be the money that they're asking for is paying for that editor if they don't have somebody on staff. So asking the question as why they need the money up front is a good plan. But I personally don't feel like that's that bothers me a little bit.
Well, and the percentage gives them a great deal of incentive to get you the best deal possible when they take it to market.
Exactly. So, I mean, if you're selling, we'll say most fiction books at this point sell between $8 and $13, but it's only costing about $5 for the publisher. So anything that's above and beyond the $5, because their costs are low because they've got, they're printing thousands of copies at once. So it's a lot cheaper than doing print on demand. So in that case, they end up having, they get their cut of the printing cost, and then you end up having a royalty check that is some part of the full price, but the bookseller has to take some, so there are cuts everywhere. So that's like the difference. Like you have to make the choice between self-publishing where there aren't going to be cuts, but you're paying for everything up front, but then everything after is profit afterwards. Whereas with the traditional publisher, you might not be paying for anything up front, but you're getting little teeny tiny dribbles the whole way. It's all a balance. It depends on what you want, really.
This is not my niche, but I know people who write, and I've heard that I don't know. I'll just say this, Dorinda. If I was going to go into fiction, I'd really consider self-publishing, and self-publishing a series. I mean, you can do it really cheap, and then you start building. Because that's the thing. It's one thing to publish one book, but especially like with fiction, there's so many that are publishing multiple books, and then there's a building of an audience, right? So it is a different model, but yeah, that people are building up and making some decent money by building that readership. So anyway. But that's with the paragon of evil, Amazon. But
no, I'm not saying that at all.
No, I know. I have mixed feelings about them. They're print on demand. I've had to send a number of books back because of the poor print quality, but it is what it is.
But I think that what's really important to really consider is all this publishing and things like that will come in later. Get the book written, like really just get it done. Even if you end up just with one copy for yourself, trust me, it's worth it. Okay, just being able to, you know, look at something. And you know what's really interesting, when you work in any field, what I have found is I could have a conversation with someone and tell them that a couple of years ago, I would make a few $1 million doing this kind of work. Or I would tell them, I published a book. I made $1 from it, but I published a book. This actually, for some reason, is perceived as a much better achievement. Okay, so from a professional perspective, it's definitely worth doing. But I really think that, you know, just get it done, just write it. And the way that you write it is, okay, what's the end game, what it is that I would like to achieve, divide it into chapters, okay? So divide it and work backwards, okay? And just make it so it actually makes sense from the end perspective. So what is it that the reader has to, like, how do they have to feel at the end? What do they have to, what sort of knowledge they have to gain? Obviously from fiction, slightly different, but I'm sure it's similar. You know, how do you want them to feel? And do you want them to take any steps after that? But let's say from fiction, you just want them to feel a certain way. Okay, divide it into chapters and just analytically decide, you know, what each chapter is going to be about. And then just write, just commit to writing X amount of words every single day. And just start, you know, even if it's a small amount, you'll find that once you start writing, it's just, you keep on writing. So it's, you know, or even if one day it doesn't seem to come out of it, doesn't seem to flow, but it's just one chapter at a time. You know, another trick, if just before we finish up, like if I was to do it again, what would I do different? I probably would actually, okay, it's end game. So what it is that I would like a person to achieve, chapters, and I would actually use a dictaphone rather than writing, okay? Because when you're writing, you kind of concentrate, is this grammar correct? Is it not, in my case anyway? You know, am I sounding it right? Whereas if you can just talk about something, just get a dictaphone and talk about it, okay? There are people on Elance, on, you know, Fiverr, it's another website that you can go onto, they can transcribe it for you. Okay, and that way, this whole process of taking a long time can take a very, very short time. So that's probably one trick that I would use if I was to do it again. But would I do it again? I wasn't planning to, but after having this conversation, absolutely. Why not?
I also want to add one more editing trick that you probably were told in school, and it probably has left your mind at this point, but to save time and money, because depending on the editor you work with, if you're doing the self-publishing route, you do want to hire an editor, because every single one of those typos is annoying as a reader. And I'm the first to admit that drives me crazy when I see lots of typos in a book, because I'm like, I want to support self-publishers and self-published authors, because I think it's a really amazing thing to have it in your own voice. But when I see those typos in the first chapter and it's every other sentence, it drives me a little crazy. So you do want to hire an editor, but to save time and energy with the editor, actually read your book out loud before you send it to anybody. Because what's going to happen is, if you haven't used the dictaphone, like Anna just suggested, and you're typing it up, what you've written does not necessarily sound normal when you read it, and you're going to catch every single mistake, and you're going to be like, oh, that just didn't sound right, and then you go back and fix it that way, and it'll save you a lot of time and energy with an editor who, if they charge per word or per minute, or not per minute, but per page, and then you have to go back to them a second time because they're still charging per word. I mean, it depends on the type of editor. For me, I tell you, like, this is how much time it takes me to edit this amount of book, and I assume we're going to be editing twice. So this is like the top dollar amount that it's actually going to cost. And most of the time it ends up being less, with the exception of the one that has been working on it now for 2 years. That one is probably not going to be less than what I think the top price is, just because of how many times it's gone back and forth. But there are some editors who do it by, you know, so many words per page, or like per page. And if you read it out loud, you can fix a lot of your own mistakes before you even send it to an editor. And that actually, and And the other trick is not just reading it aloud, but reading it backwards. So you start on the last page and work your way backwards, and you will catch things more effectively that way. If you're not reading it aloud, but literally read it backwards, and your brain will catch the mistakes, and you'll find all sorts of interesting errors just by reading the book last word, second to last word, third to last word, and work your way to the front of the book. So those are 2 editing tricks that save time and energy and effort for yourself and the editor in the long run in this entire editing process. So
That's great. You know, Catherine,
yeah.
if I could just add one more thing with, you know, with using dictaphone, another way of doing, I just thought of it now, but another way of doing it is to actually have, like write a whole bunch of questions that you would like to have answered in the book. So let's say, for example, if it's a nonfiction book, and you would like it to sort of address certain issues, okay, write those questions down and get somebody, a friend, to interview you. Okay, put a dictaphone on and just get them to ask you questions, and you just naturally go and respond to it. Okay, and before you know it, you've got a whole book written.
Yes, that's actually another excellent way to do a lot of the nonfiction books, because that is, for instance, and I'm going to use our support and connection calls in Lifebook as a great example of this. I have a lot of knowledge in my head, but until somebody asks me the right question, it's not showing up on the platform. And then it'll come out in the support and connection calls. So that's why it's kind of good to go on the support and connection calls, because I know that Heidi and Danny and Jency do the exact same thing. They've got a lot of knowledge in their head because we've been doing Lifebook for a really long time, and we know what works for people and what hasn't worked for people. But until you actually ask us the question, we might not even know that you need an answer, and therefore it never shows up on the platform. So that does happen to be a really good way to do a nonfiction book. And in fact, in some ways, it has really good to do a fiction book to get a plot point down. I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and I had been kind of stumbling in my own head about what I was writing next, and we talked it out. And so now I have my plot points for the next couple chapters, which is a really nice thing to do. So definitely consider doing that. So we have had a wonderful conversation. We've been talking for almost an hour and a half, and I really think this conversation could go on for hours longer, because it is a really fun topic to talk about. Please do put any other questions you have underneath the events in the events tab, and then I will collect all of those questions, and Anna and Mark and I will put together a document that gives some answers and post that up with the article so that people can find it. So Anna and Mark, I want to thank you for joining me on this panel discussion. This was a lot of fun, and I am looking forward to actually having the ability to have other conversations like this in the future. And I hope to see everybody else who is on this call and who's watching the recording to see your books as well. And I'm going to make this offer here and now. At some point when you are actually in a question and a pause spot where you're just really not sure where to go in the publishing step forward, I am more than willing to answer questions. So send me a message on the platform, and I will get back to you, and we can have a conversation via text message or via email, or because I want to make sure everybody who is in Lifebook has the ability to get their book written and published, because I think that is part of our Lifebook process. Anybody who has that desire and has that goal in their Lifebook, I want to help you get there. So reach out whenever you need to, because I am more than willing to spend some time having discussions to help you get to where you want to go. So have a wonderful rest of your evening or day or whatever time in the world it is right now for you. And I will get this recording posted in, I'm going to say I will get the recording posted probably in 72 hours so that Anna, Mark, and I have time to answer questions and get the article written so that those questions can be answered And that will give people time to get questions up and us to answer before the article is actually posted. So assume this recording will be up in about 72 hours. So have a lovely rest of your week and the rest of Intellectual Month.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for hanging with us.
Thank you. It was
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.